Since when did real estate become this expensive? And since when did owning a home, something that should be a basic right of every citizen, get treated like a special commodity, turned into a speculative tool for individuals and giant financial groups around the world? Settle down to build a life has long been everyone's dream. Yet in a climate where rents, home prices, and the cost of living keep climbing, many people feel crushed by the pressure and don't even dare dream of owning a home anymore. With a simple calculation, you can see that to buy a house in a major city, you'd have to save for almost 100 years to make that dream come true. Sadly, this is a thorny problem that nearly every country on Earth is facing. And Push, a 2019 documentary following UN Special Rapporteur and investigative advocate Leilani Farha, was the first film to tackle this issue head-on. Through the film, audiences witness a range of housing failures in countries around the world. Apartment values skyrocketing across major cities, pushing workers out of urban centers, alongside an unprecedented global housing crisis. Is there any solution that could reverse the financialization of housing and restore it to its true value, not only as an economic good, but as a matter of human rights? Today, let's talk about Push and lay bare the painful problems surrounding real estate in our societies. The film opens in a curious way, following a former French teacher who left the classroom to pursue a career in real estate brokerage in Toronto, Canada. For him, buying a house, renovating it, and figuring out how to sell it is far more exciting than sitting in a lecture hall, because every home has its own shape, colors, and atmosphere. From that, he can provide useful information for people who need it. However, throughout his time on the job, he's noticed that the question people care about most isn't the amenities a home offers. Instead, buyers ask by how many percent the sale price will exceed the listing price on the market. In reality, this question is common when the market is scorching hot and buyers are prepared to pay over ask due to competition or bidding wars. They're prone to overlook small flaws, a tiny bathroom, a dark bedroom, or too few windows. Price has become the #1 concern for anyone trying to buy a home right now. That's right. In 2019 alone, housing in big cities became a searing issue for everyone. Reports show that over the past 30 years, property values in Toronto have surged by 425%, while median household income has risen only about 133%. That tells us housing has become a burden not just for the current generation, but for those coming next. Leilani Farha, the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to adequate housing, set out to assess conditions on the ground in Toronto. Along her route, protest flyers plastered the walls decrying exorbitant rent hikes by landlords. Locals said they did this because the rents they pay don't match what they get. Beyond basic sanitation problems, garbage, rats, and cockroaches, most apartment fixtures are broken and never repaired. Residents say that in recent years, building management has stopped providing services, dodging responsibility, and leaving everyone disappointed and discouraged. Management wants to force tenants out so they can renovate and flip low-income buildings into upscale towers with sky-high rents. The issue is, building companies can't evict people without just cause. If they want to upgrade infrastructure, why aren't they fixing the broken fixtures tenants have reported? On top of that, with baseless accusations, claiming tenants committed serious offenses, management compels families to vacate and then jacks up the rents to absurd levels. It's just one of many tactics used to force residents out. But where are people supposed to go when this is the situation across Toronto? Menkes Kaprayat MJA style large landlords. The film highlights a company rendered as MCAP Living, a property manager, landlord, directly rent out hundreds of buildings, holding roughly 240-350 properties across Canada. In the district Leilani visits alone, they own 19 towers, and predictably, residents are being squeezed out of all of them. Likewise, Phil, a tenant in another district, is struggling with housing. He jokes that his room feels like a jail cell, because it's cramped, poorly equipped, and starved of light. Through April, with average temperatures around 5 to 12 degrees, 41 to 54 degrees, he barely had hot water. The heating shut off. The faucet leaked constantly. The window frames were taped together and could fall out any time. Even with such awful conditions, Phil has nowhere else to go. He was born and raised here. He's rooted in this community. And as mentioned, low-cost apartments across Toronto are in the same state, so moving isn't a real solution. He very much wants to speak with management to find common ground. But to this day, no one has been reachable. All this weighs on Leilani. She argues the world faces a truly urgent situation. Rapid urbanization is colliding head-on with stagnant wages, leaving many unable to afford housing. The poor are genuinely struggling. Even the middle class, people considered relatively secure, are feeling the strain of city living. Leilani says she doesn't want to overuse the word crisis, but it's clear we're in the grip of a new kind of crisis, one in which people can no longer hold on and live in major cities. So who are cities for, in the end? For working people? Or are they simply so expensive that no one can actually live there? It's not hard to recognize what people truly need for a stable life. Beyond basics, like food and water, education, jobs, and physical safety, shelter belongs on that list. Saskia Sassen, a Columbia University professor and leading global city theorist, notes that housing is being swallowed whole by price, while wages barely budge, an imbalance that burdens nations worldwide. According to reports, in 59 of 102 countries surveyed, just to afford a home in their own country. A home in their own country. This mismatch in urbanization has spawned countless painful stories. Valparaiso, a famed port city in central Chile, often called the street art capital of South America, and a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its historic architecture and cascading hills, faces a similar crisis. In a small hilltop home, an elderly woman tells Leilani unbelievable stories. Construction companies trying to coerce residents to abandon their houses, simply because those homes sit next to planned developments. Hospitals, schools, parks, and dozens of homes have been demolished to make way for luxury condos. The kicker? Those luxury units are almost entirely empty, because no one in Valparaiso can afford them. The building spree has destroyed not only a recognized cultural heritage, but also the local environment. Olive groves, almond trees, and plum trees are cut down. Children lose places to play and be active. Everything vanishes so those high-rise condos can rise. And this isn't just Chile, it's global. Worse yet, these projects rarely serve the community or local, contrary to their initial marketing. In reality, buying up rural land forces people out of the countryside, cutting off livelihoods and pushing them to cities in hopes of finding stable jobs, making urban density swell. But those who already live in big cities now face the risk of displacement due to the uneven development of real estate markets. Notting Hill, the renowned, characterful neighborhood in West London, blending historic charm, multicultural vibrancy, and distinctive art, has undergone seismic change. John, born and raised there, is proud of the neighborhood's history. He rhapsodizes about the 1999 film Notting Hill, but says its runaway success had unforeseen consequences. What John loved most was the sense of community. People were tightly knit regardless of faith or ethnicity, creating a warmth many would call family. Step onto the street and you'd meet familiar faces. You might not know everyone's name, but you recognized most local shopkeepers. Gradually, things changed. First, pop stars and outsiders moved in, drawn by the vibe. When the film hit, it sparked a global wave. People flocked to see the Blue Doors, the bookstore from the movie. The area became a hotspot in the truest sense. New schools and leisure centers formed, attracting the wealthy en masse. As they began buying up properties, the community John loved disappeared. Homes traded at eye-watering prices. Look at this building. When it was put up for sale, someone offered £20 million. But that's nothing compared to another property nearby that sold for £50 million. Yet the entire row is empty. It sounds absurd, but after anonymous billionaires purchase these buildings, they leave them vacant. No one lives there. Whole streets become dead zones. You can stand in the middle of the road with no fear of getting hit by a car. Sure, a few pubs and restaurants still operate, but broadly, the community is gone, vanished without threats or fabricated charges like those seen in Toronto. John bought his flat back in 1994. Faced with today's breakneck price growth, he couldn't sell and afford to live elsewhere. And he can't keep up with London's ballooning living costs either. Like many, he's stuck in a lose-lose situation. A map shows London dotted with properties owned by foreign companies, 80% of them sitting empty, a staggering waste. It raises a pointed question. Has the Ministry of Housing and the City Council truly prioritized the lives of Londoners? Locals are forced out of the inner city. The homeless have nowhere to go, and buildings sit without occupants. Leilani visited one such building, vacant since 2003 and no one knows its owner. Nearby residents whisper it belonged to a wealthy, former general from Qatar. He reportedly paid £25 million, nearly D900 billion for it. This is one of the starkest dysfunctions when housing is treated as an asset. The rich use it for speculation. They hoard properties across neighborhoods and wait to flip them at higher prices for the spread. It's infuriating, but no one can do much because technically, investors aren't breaking the law. They buy and sell and pay their taxes. But from a human rights perspective, Leilani argues most countries bear responsibility for allowing this to happen. She points out that while states sign and pledge to guarantee human rights for people within their borders, governments have failed to honor those promises by letting significant segments of their populations live precariously. Another critical question: if worst comes to worst, say a resident's home falls inside a redevelopment zone or a disaster like a fire strikes, how will people be compensated, and what will authorities do to ensure their lives aren't upended? This is what John and the residents of Grenfell Tower have been aching to hear addressed. Reports show that at Ju054 on June 14, 2017, an electrical fault set the 24-story building ablaze. 72 people lost their lives. 233 survivors were left homeless. A massive wave of anger swept across the UK as deep-seated problems surfaced. Shoddy construction materials that let the fire spread rapidly. Repeated tenant warnings about safety risks and degrading living conditions ignored by authorities. A lack of proper fire alarms and escape routes, making evacuation and rescue extremely difficult. The tragedy triggered countless investigations and led to changes in building safety laws, with the government inspecting thousands of buildings nationwide. Grenfell primarily housed low-income residents, a community experts call socially vulnerable. Bitterly, Grenfell stood right next to luxury towers and wealthy neighborhoods. In other words, the fire directly forced the poor out of the area they'd called home for life, because no one could afford to move into the high-end complexes nearby. No one cared. No politician dared take responsibility. In an emergency session, to address the aftermath, a city council member even said that if people couldn't afford the rents in Notting Hill, they shouldn't live there. Technically, that statement isn't wrong, but it was made at a moment when the council had no plan for temporary housing. Such tone-deaf remarks poured fuel on long-standing frustrations, igniting a fresh wave of public fury. Yes, it's understandable that real estate values rise over time, but when they rise so high that they surpass people's ability to pay and outstrip living standards, that's a different matter. Since when did homes, something governments should regard as a human right, become a special commodity? Plenty of people speculate on gold, but owning gold isn't a human right. Housing is. In reality, soaring home prices in major cities are a crushing burden on low-income people. They can't buy, and often can't even rent, when housing eats 80–90% of their income. Who can guarantee it won't rise further? Meanwhile, wages barely move. It's a harsh truth with no satisfying answers so far. The deeper Leilani investigates, the more hopeless she feels. There seems to be no easy fix. Sweden is ranked among the world's highest standard countries, with comprehensive social welfare and stable quality of life. Yet in recent years, Sweden has also seen rents and home prices soar. Blackstone, one of the world's largest investment firms headquartered in New York, poured money into low-income housing in Sweden starting in 2014. Under the banner of renovating social housing, they were able to push rents up by 50%. The problem is that Blackstone is an investor. They don't care about living standards or tenants, only about ramping up cash flow. According to Nobel laureate economist Joseph Stiglitz, firms like Blackstone don't want to tie up all their own capital in real estate. So they raise funds from a large pool of investors and create securities backed by, say, 10,000 apartments they own. When investors buy those securities, they're effectively entitled to the rental income and the appreciation of those properties over time. In other words, Blackstone offloads financial risk by slicing it up among other investors. Professor Saskia Sassen makes another distinction. finance is very different from banking. Finance sells things it doesn't truly own and needs ever more sophisticated instruments to penetrate other sectors. Banks cultivate long-term relationships. High finance behaves like mining. Once it extracts what it wants, it doesn't care about the aftermath. What puzzles Leilani is why Sweden, so admired for quality of life, would let a vulture company, one that profits from crises and recessions, like Blackstone, into its housing market. In some ways, cross-border deals don't just deliver economic benefits, they also come with political benefits. Sasson continues, if you look at the political class, governments today are far poorer than they were in the 1980s, before the era of value extraction, a process in which financial conglomerates, investment funds, and those with economic power siphon off the lion's share of profits, assets, and social resources. The global value of real estate, viewed as an investment asset, has reached 217 trillion, larger than total global GDP combined. In other words, the world is confronting phenomena that outstrip conventional notions of money. This is value extraction in sophisticated disguise, appearing as complex financial products virtually no one outside finance can understand. As for politicians, instead of learning and intervening, they defer to financial experts, the very people who engineer these instruments and profit from society's confusion. Take Blackstone. After buying up entire neighborhoods and sprucing them up, they can, through financial alchemy, inflate the value of those areas many times over. They make everything look sleek and rebrand the district as premium, while pushing poorer families out by any means necessary. As investors, they almost never address the human side. Who actually lives in and owns these buildings? Companies like Blackstone always seem to win in crises. After the 2008 US financial meltdown, when people struggled to pay their mortgages, Blackstone swooped in. In a few years, they bought over 80,000 homes at rock-bottom prices. By renting whole houses, they transformed single-family rentals into a multi-billion-dollar market, layering on multiple profit streams. It's no surprise that countries like Sweden and Spain were next in line, ripe for the financialization of housing, turning homes into financial products. Worryingly, when Leilani presented these issues at the United Nations, few seemed to care. The annual session became a monologue. No one was really listening. People scrolled their phones, watched funny clips, texted, even shopped online. No one bothered with the fact that elites are flouting basic norms and then act shocked by the working class's anger. Social imbalance grows, widening the gulf between classes, while those in power aren't creating new wealth, only taking from the poor. Globally, nowhere is immune. Rents in Berlin have risen 20%, and in some areas even more. Barcelona has become a place people don't want to stick around. Residents are gradually moving out. Some try to hold on, but how long can they bear it as housing costs keep rising? While business stagnates? It's a wicked problem with no easy solution. Roberto Saviano, screenwriter of the hit series Gomorrah, lives in constant fear of mafia threats across Italy. He's detailed the structure of organized crime with precision and exposed their illegal money-making schemes. According to Saviano, once these groups earn dirty money, they start buying restaurants, hotels, and many kinds of real estate. But how do they prove the money is clean? They set up companies in tax havens, jurisdictions with extremely low or zero taxes and high financial secrecy. Then they buy distressed properties, say a restaurant in Rome, a hotel or apartments, without arousing suspicion. To sanitize ownership, they sell these assets to their own shell companies in the tax haven. When that company brings the title back into the country, the assets appear completely legitimate. That's how they launder money and distribute their assets worldwide without fear of clawbacks or investigations. If they want even more dirty profit, they just sell to someone else at a much higher price. It's a near-perfect mechanism, hard to attack or trace. The presence of tax havens means everyone wants to launder and hide assets. Anyone, from Queen Elizabeth to drug lord Rafael Caro Quintero, to singer Shakira, to virtually any tech or financial conglomerate, can hold all or part of their wealth offshore. What happens to that money? Over time, it flows into shell companies, travel businesses, hotels, shops, supermarkets, football clubs, art investments, museums, political payoffs. Ultimately, the money trail disappears. Another point to watch is megacorporations' tax avoidance. Amazon, Facebook, Netflix, the first thing they do is minimize taxes. Saviano snarks, "Why does an honest worker pay taxes on, say, 60% of their income, while a multi-billion-dollar company pays only 4%? Companies push real estate values as high as possible to hide as much dirty money as they can. That's why, without parental help, most young people can't realize the dream of a home of their own." Another question. Where do giants like Blackstone get the money? From pension funds. But if they use pension money, they're compelled to keep it earning steadily to ensure retirees get paid. So Leilani travels to South Korea, a country with massive pension funds. In just 50 years, South Korea went from impoverished to the world's 11th largest economy, an astonishing rise, but not without a brutal trade-off. A poor man on the outskirts of Seoul recounts that in 2008, thugs showed up to force locals to sell. The bitter irony: most of these enforcers were hired by construction companies, and to prevent an extreme response from residents, the police came along. Yet the police allowed the thugs to attack residents, coercing them into signing away their homes for pennies, stepping in only when residents fought back. It's an ugly truth of South Korea's rapid, overheated urban development. Clearly, this violates human rights. Leilani demanded that Korean authorities change course and adhere more strictly to human rights obligations. They cannot force people out without just cause. Destroying others' lives doesn't improve society or beautify the city. It only causes pain, burdens the social fabric, and resolves nothing. At a session with UN rapporteurs and human rights organizations from many countries, Leilani connected with a wide network. Most nations, UK, France, Italy, Spain, Germany, pledged not to privatize public land and to curb vulture firms' overreach in finance and politics. In addition, they must address housing for low-income workers and improve safety across aging apartment blocks worldwide. There's a lot to do, countless hurdles, and many knots yet to be untangled. Still, if we are truly determined, the housing issue, or more broadly, the right to a dignified life, can be safeguarded, but only if we put it first. Push is a panoramic portrait of today's global housing landscape. While the solutions it offers are not plentiful or fully practical yet, the film, in its way, forces governments to look differently at people's basic need to settle and thrive. It's heartbreaking to watch a younger generation unable to buy homes and workers pushed further from major cities. Real estate has become a worldwide scourge, dragging social safety nets down with it. Where is the world heading? Will the housing story improve? These aren't questions we can answer overnight, but with the efforts underway, we are entitled to hope for a brighter future.